Nancy was a storm in heels. The kind of woman whose name alone made wives in Lagos clutch their husbands tighter. At 27, she had already built a reputation as a homewrecker, though she preferred to call herself a collector of moments. She didn't want love, didn't want children, didn't want a white dress. All Nancy craved was adrenaline, the sweet thrill of sex wrapped in the danger of being caught. Sex without fear is like eating soup without pepper, she once told her girlfriends over cocktails. They laughed nervously, until weeks later they realized she wasn't joking. One by one, they began to cut her off, after discovering she had slept with their men. The betrayals piled so high that soon Nancy had no circle left. But she didn't mind. To her, loyalty was boring. Risk was her true religion. She lived for the chaos, sneaking out of a hotel lobby moments before a wife stormed in, leaving lipstick stains on collars or accidentally forgetting lingerie in the back seat of another woman's husband's car. Back home, she would sip wine and imagine the explosion she had caused, smiling like a devil who had outwitted heaven. But beneath the fiery laughter was a shadow that haunted her, the fear of karma. She believed that if she ever married, her sins would come for her. So she swore never to walk down the aisle. She would rather remain single than watch the universe punish her with betrayal. That was the vow she lived by, until she met Jide. The first time she saw him was at a corporate dinner in Victoria Island. He wasn't the loudest in the room, but he carried himself like a man who owned the air others breathed. His suit draped effortlessly over his broad shoulders. His watch gleamed against his dark skin, and his smile was slow, deliberate, like a predator who had already chosen his prey. Nancy noticed him watching her, and to her surprise, she liked it. When he finally approached, she expected the usual flattery. Instead, he leaned in with quiet confidence. "You look like a woman who doesn't wait for permission," he said, eyes fixed on hers. Nancy smirked. "And you look like a man who belongs to someone else." Jide's lips curved. "Married," he admitted smoothly, almost casually. "But what's marriage if not a golden cage?" The words lit Nancy's veins on fire. Another married man. Another delicious game. She leaned closer, her perfume brushing over his senses like temptation itself. "Perfect," she whispered. "Because cages only make the escape sweeter." What Nancy didn't know was that Jide's marriage was nothing but smoke. He had never exchanged vows, never lived with a wife. He had studied her, stalked her, and crafted the perfect lie to lure her in. And judging by the mischievous glint in her eyes, his trap had worked. For Nancy, it was the beginning of another dangerous affair. For Jide, it was the beginning of something much deeper, a love he was willing to risk everything to keep. Jide had always been the kind of man women noticed. Tall, dark, with a quiet confidence that made people lean in when he spoke. But for all his charm, Jide carried a loneliness that wealth and women could not cure. He had dated, yes, even loved once, but Nancy was different. The first time he saw her wasn't at the gala where she thought they met. It was months earlier, in a lounge on the island. She was with another man, a married man, laughing too loudly, her hand brushing deliberately against his thigh. Most women would have looked vulgar in that scene, but Nancy looked alive, magnetic, like chaos disguised as beauty. Jide had watched her slip out, whisper something to the man, and then saunter off alone with a smile that said, "I own you." That smile haunted him for weeks. He asked around. It wasn't hard to learn her reputation. Every whisper led back to the same truth. Nancy didn't want single men. She thrived on the forbidden. Married men were her drug. If you were free, she'd get bored. But if you were tied down, she would pull at your leash until you snapped. That was when Jide made his decision. If he had to wear a mask to have her, then he would. So, at the gala, when Nancy asked with that sly grin if he belonged to someone else, Jide said the word she wanted to hear. Married. And the fire in her eyes told him it was the right move. From that night the game began. He called her only late at night, speaking in hushed tones as though afraid of being caught. When they met at his office, He timed it to when he knew no one would disturb them, but he told her, "My wife could show up any moment." Nancy's pulse quickened every time, and Jide found himself addicted, not to the lie, but to the way she clung to him when danger was near. Their first kiss happened in that office. She had arrived unannounced, 30 minutes before he claimed his wife would be visiting. The thrill in her eyes was wild as she pushed him against his desk, her lips hot, hungry, claiming him as though she was marking territory. Jide's hands gripped her waist, pulling her closer, the taste of her tongue mixed with the perfume she always wore, something sweet but sharp like her. "You're insane," he murmured against her lips. "And you love it," she replied, smiling wickedly before deepening the kiss. For Nancy, it was the beginning of another affair, one more dangerous than the last. For Jide, it was torture and bliss in equal measure. He loved her, but each moan, each secret touch was built on a lie that could destroy them both. And yet, every time he thought of confessing, he looked at her, beautiful, reckless, intoxicated by the danger, and he swallowed the truth. Because if he told her now, she would walk away. So he chose silence. He chose to play along with the fantasy, even as it pulled him deeper into something real. Nancy was on fire. For the first time in a long time, she had found a man who matched her hunger for risk. Jide was smooth, calculated, never flinching when she pushed him toward chaos. That only made her crave him more. Other men panicked when she played her dangerous games. Jide didn't. He let her. He indulged her. Late nights became their ritual. She would wait until midnight, pour herself a glass of wine, and dial his number. The sound of his hushed hello thrilled her. She imagined him whispering from his matrimonial bed. His wife's breathing just a few feet away. "Are you awake because of me?" she teased one night. "I can't sleep without hearing your voice," Jide whispered back. His tone was so low, so intimate she shivered. She pressed her thighs together, smiling wickedly into the darkness. The calls weren't enough. Soon she started visiting his office at odd hours, her body wrapped in short dresses that made the secretaries whisper. She loved timing her visits, arriving 30 minutes before his wife was supposedly due. Each kiss, each frantic touch on his office desk made her feel like she was robbing another woman blind. And Jide, instead of pushing her away, pulled her closer, kissed her harder, as though daring fate to expose them. But Nancy wasn't satisfied with stolen kisses. She wanted danger to breathe down their necks. So she began leaving clues. One afternoon, she left her red lace lingerie in the back seat of his car, tucked just beneath the seatbelt buckle. Later, she giggled imagining his wife finding it. "Are you trying to get me killed?" Jide asked when he called her later that night, but his laughter betrayed him. "Maybe," Nancy replied, sipping her drink. "Doesn't it make your heart race?" Jide chuckled softly, but inside he felt the sting of guilt. There was no wife to discover anything, no one to catch them. Yet he allowed her to believe the fantasy because it kept her close. Nancy escalated further. She sent him a gift, a silk tie, beautifully wrapped and delivered straight to his house. She didn't care if his wife opened it. In fact, she hoped she would. She sat at home that evening, sipping wine, picturing the fight that would ensue. Instead, Jide texted her a picture of himself wearing the tie. "You're insane," she typed back, her pulse racing. "And you love it," he replied with a wink emoji. The games continued. Every moment was a high, every encounter a gamble. Nancy was addicted, her body alive only in the shadow of danger. And though Jide kissed her back, touched her, entered her with the same fiery hunger, he was the one who lay awake afterward, wondering how long this charade could last. Because the deeper he fell, the harder it would be when the truth finally broke her. For Nancy, love was never the addiction. Danger was. And with Jide, she was overdosing. Every encounter had to be riskier than the last, every meeting an edge-of-the-cliff thrill. If the stakes weren't high enough, she wasn't interested. She called him one afternoon while lounging in silk sheets, the ceiling fan humming lazily above her. "I want to come over tonight," she purred. "Not tonight," Jide replied quickly, lowering his voice. My wife. Nancy laughed, cutting him off. That's exactly why tonight. I want to kiss you in your living room while she's upstairs. Her words burned in his ear. Jide chuckled nervously, masking the twist of guilt in his chest. You're insane. And you love it, she whispered, her favorite taunt. That night she didn't come, but the seed had been planted. Jide sat in his empty house, pacing, imagining what she thought was real. He could almost hear her laugh, see her mischievous grin, feel her nails on his chest. The lie weighed heavy, but losing her would be heavier. Nancy escalated again. One evening, she slipped into his office wearing nothing beneath her coat. When he locked the door behind her, she dropped the coat onto his desk, standing there in nothing but heels and a wicked smile. You'll get us caught, Jide whispered, even though the office was silent. That's the point, Nancy teased, straddling him as he sat in his chair. Don't you feel alive like this? Knowing someone could walk in. Her lips devoured his, her hands clawed at him, and he surrendered, even as his mind screamed at him that it was only feeding her addiction. But Nancy didn't stop there. She sent a bouquet of roses to his office with a note signed yours forever. The secretary almost asked questions, and Nancy sat at home, biting her lip with excitement at the thought. She wanted Jide's world to shake. She wanted him to sweat. She wanted chaos. Yet when he called her later, instead of panic, he laughed softly. You'll destroy me one day. I'm already destroying you, she answered, her tone dripping with satisfaction. But in truth, Jide wasn't destroyed. He was drowning. Not in danger but in love. Every laugh, every reckless stunt only made him ache for her more. And with each kiss, each whispered "I love the risk," he saw more clearly. This wasn't just a game for him anymore. It was becoming his life. But how could he build a life with her on a foundation of lies? How could he confess now, when her entire desire for him hinged on the one truth he was hiding? Every night, Nancy slept with a smile, replaying the adrenaline. Every night, Jide lay awake, replaying the lie. And both of them, without knowing, were racing toward a storm. It had been weeks of thrills. Weeks of Nancy slipping into Jide's office half-dressed, leaving her perfume lingering in his car, sending risky gifts that would have ruined any real marriage. Weeks of adrenaline highs, whispers in the dark, and laughter shared on the edge of exposure. But Jide was unraveling. The lie had grown too heavy, pressing on his chest until even her kisses couldn't numb it. Every time Nancy whispered, "Imagine if your wife walks in now," his heart cracked. There was no wife, no cage. Just him, lying to keep the only woman he'd ever truly wanted. One evening, he took her to a quiet restaurant tucked away on Victoria Island. Candlelight flickered between them, wine glasses half full. Nancy looked ravishing in a short black dress, her lips painted blood red, her eyes glinting with the thrill of the secret life they shared. "You're awfully tense tonight," she teased, swirling her glass. "Afraid I left more lingerie in your car?" Jide chuckled weakly. He leaned forward, his fingers brushing hers. "Nancy, there's something I need to tell you." Her eyes narrowed playfully. "Don't tell me you're leaving your wife. That would ruin all the fun." The words stabbed him, but he pressed on. "I don't have a wife." For a moment, Nancy's laughter echoed across the table. She thought it was a joke, another role play, another way to heighten the thrill. But when she saw his face, steady, solemn, stripped of charm, the smile slid from her lips. "What did you just say?" she whispered. "I've never been married," Jide confessed. "I lied. I only said I was married because I knew that's what would draw you to me. I was desperate, Nancy. Desperate for you." The silence that followed was louder than thunder. Nancy's chest tightened as if her air had been stolen. She stared at him, the candlelight flickering across her face, her mind racing back over every dangerous encounter, every risk, every thrill she thought she was having. All of it a lie. You tricked me," she said, her voice breaking into anger. "I had no choice," Jide pleaded. You wouldn't have given me a second glance if you knew I was single. But Nancy, everything else was real. Every touch, every kiss, every word. Stop. Her chair screeched against the floor as she stood abruptly, eyes burning with fury. You ruined it. You ruined everything. Heads turned in the restaurant as she grabbed her purse and stormed out, leaving Jide frozen, heart pounding. He didn't chase her. He couldn't. Nancy drove home in silence, her knuckles white against the steering wheel. Her body trembled, not from betrayal but from emptiness. Without the danger, without the threat of being caught, she realized she didn't feel alive. She didn't feel anything. And for the first time in her life, Nancy wasn't smiling. Nancy's apartment had never felt so empty. She sat in silence, her phone buzzing with Jide's calls and messages, but she didn't answer. The man she thought was her perfect fix, her most thrilling secret yet, had built their entire affair on a lie. A lie that stripped the danger away. A lie that made her feel exposed, foolish, ordinary. She poured herself a drink, but even the burn of whiskey couldn't warm her. For the first time in years, she couldn't laugh at the chaos she'd caused. Instead, she replayed her own life like a haunting film. The husbands she had stolen, the wives she had betrayed, the friendships she had crushed. The smirk on her face when she imagined another woman suffering. All of it came crashing back. And now, staring into her glass, Nancy whispered to herself, "Maybe this is my karma." The word stung. Because deep down she believed it. The universe had finally decided to play her game. And she was the one caught. She thought of her father, the man who had broken her mother with his endless cheating. She remembered her mother crying late into the night, telling her that men were never satisfied, that marriage was only another form of prison. Maybe that was why she sought out other people's husbands, because deep down, she believed real love didn't exist. Her phone buzzed again. Jide's name lit up the screen. This time she answered. "Nancy, please." His voice was raw, almost breaking. "I know I hurt you. But I didn't lie to hurt you. I lied to keep you close. I love you." She let out a bitter laugh. "Love? You think I can love a single man? You've destroyed the only thing that made me feel alive. The risk. The danger. Without it, what's left?" "What's left is me," Jide whispered. "And what's left is you, if you let yourself be more than your past." Nancy's throat tightened. She wanted to hang up, but something in his voice, desperate, pleading, held her still. A few days later he sent her an address. Not to a restaurant, not to his office, but to a therapy center. "Please," his message read. "Talk to someone. Even if you hate me, do it for yourself." Nancy stared at the text for hours. Therapy. She almost laughed at the thought. She didn't believe she was broken. She believed she was cursed. But that night, lying alone in her bed, she felt something she had never felt before. Emptiness. Not excitement. Not lust. Just a hollow ache. And in that hollow space, she realized something terrifying. Jide wasn't the only liar in this story. She had been lying to herself for years. Fire. Nancy walked into the therapy center with the same attitude she had once carried into affairs. Bold, guarded, and daring anyone to challenge her. But beneath her red lipstick and designer sunglasses was a trembling woman. For the first time, she wasn't sneaking into danger for pleasure. She was walking straight into a mirror she'd spent her whole life avoiding. The therapist, Dr. Beasy, was a soft-spoken woman with eyes that saw too much. She didn't rush. She didn't push. She simply asked, "Why are you here, Nancy?" First, Nancy laughed. "Because a man who lied to me thinks I'm broken." But as the sessions went on, the laughter thinned. Piece by piece, the walls began to crack. Nancy confessed how she only felt alive with men who were off-limits, how the fear of being caught was better than love, how the thought of marriage terrified her more than death. She admitted that she didn't believe happiness could last, that every vow was just a countdown to betrayal. And then one day her voice broke. "My father cheated on my mother, over and over. I watched her beg for love, and he spat in her face with lies. He destroyed her and she stayed. I swore I'd never be her. I swore I'd never give a man that kind of power. So I chose danger instead. Because if I stole someone else's husband, I was the one in control. Not them. The silence that followed was suffocating. For the first time in years, Nancy cried. Not the seductive tears she sometimes faked for effect, but deep, gut-wrenching sobs that left her breathless. Dr. Beasy leaned forward gently. You were never in control, Nancy. The risk controlled you. The fear controlled you. And until you let yourself believe in something real, you'll always be running from shadows. The words stung, but they settled inside her like truth. Outside those sessions, Jide waited. He didn't push her. He didn't demand forgiveness. He simply showed up. He drove her home after appointments, brought her flowers without notes, and sat with her in silence when she didn't want to talk. He wasn't the fantasy of a dangerous affair. He was a man who wanted to be real with her. Slowly, Nancy began to change. She stopped imagining chaos when she looked at him. She stopped craving the thrill of another woman's shadow. For the first time, she wondered what it would feel like to choose love without fear. One night after therapy, she called him, her voice trembling but steady. Jide, if you ever lied to me again, I'd leave. But if you can promise me honesty, maybe I can try. There was a pause, then his voice came, thick with emotion. No more lies. Only us. For the first time in her life, Nancy didn't feel the rush of danger. She felt peace. And it scared her, but in a way that felt almost beautiful. Weeks turned into months, and the woman who once thrived on danger began to rediscover herself in silence. Nancy no longer waited by the phone at midnight, no longer sent reckless gifts, no longer craved the chaos of being caught. For the first time in her life, she wanted something different, something steady, something that didn't require her to gamble with destruction. Jide noticed it too. The sharp edges of her smile had softened. The wickedness in her laughter was still there, but behind it now lived a gentleness he had never seen before. She still teased him, still rolled her eyes when he got too serious, but now when he kissed her, she kissed him back not out of adrenaline but out of choice. One Saturday evening, he invited her to a quiet dinner at his home. There were no secretaries, no offices, no lies to hide behind. Just a warm glow of candles and soft music. Nancy wore a simple silk dress, her hair down, no performance, no mask. As they ate, she found herself restless, her heart racing in a way she hadn't felt since her reckless games. But this wasn't danger. This was anticipation. After dinner, Jide stood and walked to her side. He didn't speak immediately. Just reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Nancy froze. Don't, she whispered, her voice trembling. You know marriage terrifies me. You know what I've done. What if karma? Jide knelt before her, his eyes steady, his voice deep and raw. Karma already came for you, Nancy. Came in the form of loneliness. Of watching your friends walk away. Of living in shadows when you were meant to shine. But this... He opened the box, revealing a simple, elegant ring that sparkled under the candlelight. This is not karma. This is grace. This is us rewriting the story. Her eyes burned with tears she didn't want to shed. She had always imagined a proposal would make her want to run. Instead, she felt something else. Peace, sharp and overwhelming. Say yes, he whispered, his voice breaking. Not because of risk. Not because of fear. Say yes because for once, you want to live in the light. The silence stretched between them. Nancy's heart pounded. For years she had sworn marriage would be her downfall, that the universe would punish her if she dared. But looking at Jide, kneeling with nothing but honesty in his eyes, she realized she didn't fear karma anymore. She feared losing him. Yes, she whispered, the word trembling on her lips. Yes, Jide. He slipped the ring onto her finger, and as he rose to kiss her, Nancy felt something she had never felt before. Not adrenaline, not guilt, not chaos. She felt free. Later, as they sat together, her head on his shoulder, she whispered with a soft smile. Someone told me karma would catch up with me one day. Jide kissed her hair and asked gently, "And what do you think now?" Nancy smiled, her eyes glistening. "It already did. And it gave me you."